Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
And I'm Debbie.
And before we start, I just want to say the right side of my face is numb because I just had a cavity filled. So if I sound a little different in this episode, that's why. Today, we're going to be talking about likability, specifically around being socialized female or being a woman, and how there's this idea that we have to be likable in order to be respected, in order to have our voices be heard. It doesn't matter if it's in personal settings or in a professional situation, though I do tend to find that I obviously want to be liked in all different contexts, but I tend to find it more difficult in corporate settings and professional settings where this idea of likability is really prominent. If I'm not liked by the people that hire me on, then it could hurt my chances of getting a promotion or moving forward or things like that. I also don't think that we have to be liked in order to work together with people, but I do think there has to be respect amongst your coworkers or who you're working with, unless, of course, they're doing outrageous things like being transphobic or homophobic or sexist or racist, like all of those things, of course. There's no room for that. But I do think women and folks socialized female have this burden of needing to be liked. Have you experienced this, Mom? Because I've experienced this in my life in a lot of different capacities. Did you experience this in your career or in your personal life or professional life?
Way before I was working, I think when I was a kid, I think I thought that it was important for people to like me. And I don't think that anybody ever told me differently until I got older and I had to start figuring that out for myself. So I think from the very beginning of time, it feels like I needed or thought I had to be liked in order to create friendships, just to start out there. So I remember many years ago, my parents moved us briefly to another area in in town, and I had to go to a new school for about 6 months when I was in second grade, and I didn't like that at all. And we moved back pretty quickly, but I finished my back in those days you had an A B semester, so I was gone the A part of the semester and came back the B part of the semester. So half of second grade I came back, but when I was living in this new place, there was kids living there, and I was kind of shy, and which I think I still am today to a certain extent. And my mom gave me a bag of candy, and she said, "Go out and make friends." And I think she was a little naive as well. God probably got this from my mother wanting to be liked, because I think that looking back on that, and I have many times thought about this, they were really interested in the candy. They weren't so much interested in me. It
Mm,
wasn't like that was going to change things for me. It was just that she brought out candy. Oh, that's cool, but you can still be bratty to her or
right.
not, or still exclude her. So I remember being excluded most of the time in my elementary years.
Yeah.
And that is why we talked about this in a previous episode. That is why I sort of identify with the underdog, because
Right.
yeah, because in elementary school, many of my friends, or the small amount of friends that I had a lot of friends, but the ones that I may have hung out with were mostly the ones that were on the fringes of what people would think was acceptability. Ironically, they were the most talented and most creative people. And to this day, as grown-ups, those that I know still are very talented and very well accomplished. And we're talking mostly girls, because in elementary school, I didn't have a lot. It was very divided, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just remember thinking, oh, well, this is how you have to entice people to like you by, giving them something
Mm,
first, right?
yeah.
And so my mother did that. If I remember, my mom did that a couple of times for me, not necessarily with candy, but she would make the overture for me
Mm,
so that I
yeah.
could get an in
And
my
yeah.
friendship relationships with kids. But I never felt truly accepted, even though I thought I was really likable.
Right.
The idea of being accepted for me was, I know it's going to sound weird, but maybe you have to give somebody something in order for them to accept you. But
Mm.
I feel like I was largely not part of the full group.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I mean, I'm going to say this. I mean, I'm not trying to sound bad or like, oh, woe is me, but I think my whole life has been that. And I don't know
Yeah.
if that's my own perception of not being able to integrate, or because people didn't think my likeness was maybe authentic, or that I thought it was too
Mm.
much. I don't know. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I have great friends and I've had a nice social life over the years, but ultimately I still go back to that foundational feeling of not being easily in. I had to sort of make my way in.
Yeah, you have to make your own path into
Right.
a social
Yeah.
or yeah, I can relate to
Yeah.
that. I feel like
Yeah.
I think we both have the experience of being bullied, or at least I did at a young age in elementary school, and I was bullied for my freckles. I think you got me that book. I can't remember who it was by, but you got me this book about the freckles being
Freckle
okay and like,
juice?
yeah, freckle juice, yeah. And then I remember one girl in particular had bullied me, and I just didn't know how to stand up for myself. I'm a people pleaser. I want to be accepted, especially in school, in a school environment. And you're stuck with these people for years, right? I mean, it's a really tough situation to be in because you can't exclude yourself necessarily especially if you already feel excluded like I did. And then you have to matriculate with these kids up until you're in high school a lot of the time. So it's a really tough spot to be in. I went to a small school as well, so there wasn't a lot of options necessarily for to connect with other kids. And I think we went out to Pies, Polly's Pies, and you said to me, I can't remember what you said. You said you told me to go up to her the next day and said, "You're being rude." or
I remember
something.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I did that. And I felt, wow, I felt really good about that. Because it was like really empowering to stand up to someone, even if it wasn't the best comeback. Because I don't think it was necessarily. But it's just one of those moments where you taught me how to stand up for myself because you couldn't be there to do it. And even if you could, what 8-year-old is going to allow their parent to talk to another 8-year-old kid, at least knowingly? That's not something
Sure.
that I was going to be okay with. But yeah, I remember feeling really defeated about it. And then the next day feeling like, okay, this still sucks. It's not a good situation to be in, and I don't want to be bullied anymore. But it felt good to stand on my own 2 feet and just say something back, even if it didn't change anything, because I don't think it did necessarily. Because I felt similarly to you, felt very excluded. I didn't have like a group, a social circle in any part of my existence as a teenager or as a elementary school student. I always felt very different from a lot of people. And people now who are adults always say they feel different. So I think we all just feel different no matter what. But I think there's also things that if you have like a lot of things that are different from the mainstream, it puts you even further away from from being accepted. And I think that the same situation plays out time and again that I've found for myself in corporate settings. The elementary school kids on the playground or the high school cliques perpetuate themselves in a corporate world. And you can't move away from it. I've been on so many different I've worked in so many different companies. I've worked on so many different film sets and photography sets. All of them, they perpetuate some sort of hierarchy, some sort of relationship dynamic where they're the cool ones, you're not so cool. Like all of these things that I don't know that people know are happening, but I've witnessed it, I've experienced it, and it's fascinating to me that we continue to perpetuate those power dynamics. in professional settings, which is why I think it comes back to being likable. Because when you step foot into a new work environment, you don't know what the relationship dynamics are. You're trying to suss out all of these different things going on at once, learning a new job, meeting new people, understanding all these things. And it's all compacted with these social situations that we just don't know until we're there for a period of time. So I find that fascinating, and I think that you've experienced that too with teaching as well, with different groups of people that you've worked with.
Oh, sure. I think that what you were saying about the people that were in elementary school and high school wind up the same people that are in the work environment. That's because it works for them. That somehow they have relied on that and it works for them. And I'm thinking that there's some vulnerability with inside of me or you maybe or other people who don't feel like they are easily entered into situations that they detect. They kind of
Mm-hmm.
know that. It's like, oh, they can tell that somehow you're wounded, and so they can make it worse for you.
Yes, what is that
You know,
about?
I
Yeah.
don't know because I don't realize that I am projecting that, but I think what wounded is to them is empathy to me. So I
Yes.
think that I come across empathetic because I am an empath on my Myers Briggs and all that,
Yeah.
but it was a Briggs,
Doesn't
Myers,
matter.
whatever. Where's the S? Where's the S? But I think it's
It's
anyway. Uh,
personality test, whatever one you
yes, thank
took.
you. Whatever one I took. And I think that because I come across inclusively, that is really my MO. That a
Yeah,
lot of
same.
times I get pushed away by the people who aren't interested in inclusivity. They're interested in their own power or just
Control.
their own yes, or just their own
Yeah,
story, whatever that story is for
I
them. And
know.
I don't fit that situation.
Yes, I totally experienced this. I feel like I just recently experienced this where I'm a very open-hearted, open-minded, compassionate, empathetic person who's also extremely kind, probably to a fault, in certain situations. Some people will probably be like, "What? You're so mean," or I don't know. But in a work environment where I have to like put my best self forward, I try to come to work with a very positive attitude, and it just gets stepped on. I just get targeted, and people are mean to me. And I do not understand that at all. I'm like, isn't it better if we're all just here collaborating together? Why are you singling me out? Why are you belittling me? Why are you talking to me like I'm a child? So disrespectfully. I do not understand it. I'm like, do I give off an attitude? Because I do have a problem with authority figures sometimes when I feel like I am being talked down to, or if I feel like people aren't respecting me, I have an attitude about it because I don't appreciate that. Now, I don't mean to do that. It's something I'm working on. But I don't understand why I'm the target of people belittling me when I'm just trying to do my best, show up, and be kind. I don't know what it is about you and I that we just get people who are mean to us. And I think it's like I said before, in life, there's always something that's going to keep creeping up on you, and it's going to show up time and time again until you know how to address it, until you can learn to advocate for yourself, until you learn how to communicate better, whatever it is. But, and this is something I'm finding all the time, relationships, whether they're personal or professional, I have yet to learn how to fully advocate for myself in a way that's seen as not mean or not hurtful or whatever it is. But it's like, why am
Or
I
just
also, what's that?
I was going to say, or just powerful.
Or just powerful. Like, why do I
Hmm.
feel like I have to say what I want or what I mean in a likable way in order to be heard? Why can't I just be honest and direct in a way that's going to be effective? Because I don't I'm sure men struggle with this too, but there's a difference, right? Like when I was going to the dentist today and I was just very matter of fact, like, yeah, I'm doing okay, and I wasn't being outwardly as warm as I normally am because my baseline is like super people pleaser, and I'm trying to just come down. And when I feel like I'm just being kind of in that baseline area of being just not as warm perhaps, but I think I'm still being warm, I somehow feel very mean or like I'm being rude because I'm so used to just overly being kind. And I think kindness and likability when you're socialized female or when you identify as a woman, it's like, yeah, that's kind of our protection. To me, anyway, it's like our protection to get through the world. Because if I'm kind, if I smile, like, I'm not going to get hurt. If I'm kind, if I smile, I'm going to get that raise. If I'm kind, if I smile and I don't call someone out on their behavior, then I'm not going to get, listed as someone who's unable to be on set or work together well or whatever it is. Like, people perceive me a certain way because of how I behave. But it's like, why don't the people that are bullies in corporate world, they never get called out? And they still get raises, they still get promotions. It's so ridiculous to me. And here I am afraid because I just want to keep a job.
No, I understand what you're saying. I think that in general, it's better to be likable, whether you're a man or a woman, right? I mean, you don't want to be
Hmm.
considered somebody who is disliked or is difficult to get along with or that kind of thing. So there's
Right.
something between being likable and being difficult. And
Yes.
the in between, I think for me is, well, I won't say for me, but what I'm formulating for myself is that there's something in between that's just sort of matter of fact and direct.
Hmm.
So, for instance, I remember when I was working, I was probably upset with somebody who said something in an email that I thought was not appropriate, and I didn't think that the assignment that I was going to have to do seemed made sense to me. And so I remember sending back an email that was not something I would normally send back, that I thought was harsh.
Hmm.
And I thought for sure the person I sent it to was going to call me on it, and they never did. And then the next day I saw them and it was just regular business as usual, and I'm like, oh, their idea of harsh and my idea of harsh are totally different.
Yes.
Like, because what my idea of harsh was not being quite as likable as I normally am and more
Right.
to the point, more
Hmm.
maybe curt. And their idea of harsh is yelling at somebody, maybe, or saying
Right.
some words or whatever. And I'm like, oh, so I can kind of press the boundary out of my likability and become a little bit more curse. And that's
Yeah.
not considered harsh.
Right.
Curse?
Yeah, until you run
Kurt.
into
I
someone
said
who
Kurt.
does.
Right. I
Yeah.
think I said Kurt and I meant Kurt.
Kurt. Yeah.
Yeah, Kurt.
You put
Yes,
together
I
harsh and
yeah,
Kurt.
harsh and Kurt or terse and Kurt or whatever it is. Yes.
Talking's hard,
Yes.
okay? Talking
Yeah,
is
it
just
is.
difficult.
Especially when you're trying to formulate thoughts at the same
Yes.
time. Yeah, no. Yeah. So I think that
Yeah.
everybody has levels. And I
Yes.
guess my level from like to what I thought was harsh is not harsh at all to a
Right.
person who's already harsh and their level gets harsher.
Right, exactly. And but the problem is you never know who you're talking to. Who's going to feel like that was so harsh and you felt that was really mild, or you're not advocating, or you're not taking charge, not, whatever it is. Pe People have to tell you their expectations, I think, especially at work, but also in personal relationships. Like, the way you talk to me, I don't appreciate that. I don't like that. Can you please lower your voice? Whatever it is. But that's what I struggle with is people telling me to behave a certain way, but then I think I'm doing that, and it's still not what they want or what their expectations are. And I also feel like, I don't know if you've seen these videos on social media, but and I've experienced this myself because I have to write a lot of emails for my job and or past jobs. And when I don't include an exclamation point in an email, oh my gosh, I'm like, am I so mean? Is this person gonna see this and be like, it's not friendly, it doesn't have a friendly undertone, all of that. And so I have to go through my email and look at all the, because initially there's like five exclamation points, maybe, sometimes more. maybe I'm exaggerating, but there's several, okay, in a very short email. And this is like the millennial thing where we add way too much exclamation points because we want to come across as friendly. And if we don't have them, then it looks mean, right? Like the period at the end of a sentence is like, oh, what did I do to hurt you? You know? And I'm so afraid that people are going to think that I'm not, being friendly in an email. I want to be professional. Does it always have to be friendly? It's just like an email with information in it. It doesn't have to have an exclamation point. So, uh, this is, I think, the internet and using that to communicate, and also then communicating in real life. It's two very different situations, but it's kind of a similar feedback loop where it's like that overly friendly protectiveness that I exude in person also happens in the email and vice versa. And I'm really trying to just have a baseline of just being like, yeah, how was your, not being like totally over the top with how I think it's because I'm a people person and I really am curious about people and I want to know about people. But the more I realize is that people don't really care. They don't really want to know about you. Like, I'm always asking questions. I'm so curious about other people's lives. Tell me everything. And I don't get asked questions. I People are not interested in my life. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting to me. I don't understand that. And to be honest, I judge people who don't ask questions. I'm going to say it, okay? I'm judgy. I'm a judgy person in that way.
Well, I think we all have our elements of judge. First of all, I want to attack the email thing, and then I'm going to talk to you about what you
Yes.
just said about
Okay.
being interested in people. I remember a colleague and I who worked a long time together. We would write emails together because we'd be collaborating. We'd have to ask for help or get more information or whatever. And it was so funny because we would type it out, and at the end, a happy face. Make sure she knows or he knows that this is not meant to be. We're not
Yeah.
ridiculing. We're just wanting to know. So it
Yeah.
just got to be a joke. Da 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 da, happy face. And we type in a happy face. So I think I understand because you don't know what the tone is. So
Mm-hmm.
people can misconstrue what the tone of your email or text message is. On the other hand, you were talking about people. So whether or not I have a great memory or not, I think I have a pretty good memory, but whatever, that withstanding, I remember what people tell me.
Yeah.
And it could be very obscure and we'll have a conversation 2 years later. And this will come up and I say, "Oh yeah, I remembered you said you were going to do blah blah." And
Right.
they'll look at me and they don't remember what I said to them yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think that part of my likability, and this is not about gender specific stuff. This is just me and my personality. Is that what I have learned over the years, and maybe that was a compromise that I didn't realize until I've gotten older, is that I always looked out of myself more than I looked into myself. Not to say that
Yeah.
I'm not introspective or self-realizing or anything like that, but I've always been concerned about everybody else
Yes.
before I've been concerned about myself.
Yeah.
So I remember when we were with your brother and his wife and we were going somewhere and she looked at me, she said, your son is always so happy when he remembers his jacket and when it's like cold outside. And and immediately I remember thinking, oh, back in the day, I would make sure everybody had all their stuff, and then I would forget to bring a jacket, or I
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah.
have something that was going to make me comfortable. And that was because I was always thinking about others. So
Mm-hmm.
part of my likability was making sure everybody had what they needed and everybody was comfortable. And I don't think I even realized I was doing it until I went to go visit my mother who was in the hospital and my stepfather was there. And the hospital was quite a distance from where they lived, and he didn't have things that he needed to be with her while she was in the hospital. And he was getting ready to leave, and my mother said, "Where are you going? Why are you leaving?" Which I can understand because she's in the
Mm-hmm.
hospital. And he said, "I have to go get things that are going to make me feel comfortable." And I had
Mm-hmm.
this huge aha moment. Oh, You're allowed to make yourself comfortable, right?
Yeah.
I always made do in my comfortability,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which I think
Mm-hmm.
I made do in my likability. I just took what people gave me and I thought that was enough, even though it hurt my feelings. A lot of the times I would spend with
Yeah.
someone who was saying not nice things to me, and I wouldn't call them on it because I
Yes.
was more afraid of hurting their feelings than I was about my feelings being hurt.
100. Yes. Yes. I totally relate to that.
And that's been a thread throughout my whole life, which I don't
Too.
necessarily, I know, I'm sure I share it not only with you, but many other people. But the
Mm-hmm.
people that I have spent the majority of my time with don't seem to have that same thread.
Mm-hmm.
They're way more interested in themselves than they
Yeah.
are in someone else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is why relationships are problematic, because I want them to be just as interested in me as I am in them.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
that's all about wanting to be liked.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, you have to put the boundary up and say, okay, enough
Yes.
of that.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to equalize this a little bit more and think about myself
Yeah. Do I like
as
myself? All that
right.
stuff.
Do
Yeah.
I have what
Mm-hmm.
I need?
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to make me comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's interesting because as we were talking about being curious and asking questions of others and all of that, I also think that perhaps my inquisitiveness, though it's natural to me, also might stem from anxiety in new situations. Like that's how I people please, or that's how I fill awkward silences, or I want people to think I'm interested or invested, and I am, but also I kind of stopped doing that recently because I realized I'm just hearing people talk at me after I ask them a question and they're not reciprocating. I'd rather just be quiet. I don't think I need to ask. I don't need to fill the silences. It can be awkward, it can be whatever, and I don't need to placate my anxiety in this way. And the comfortable piece too is also really important to me as well. Like I find it really important to make sure that I'm comfortable in situations so I can be my best self. And it's hard to do sometimes. And I also think with what you said about, what did you say about the thread of something in your life? Oh, not being able to advocate or tell someone that they've hurt your feelings or that they didn't show up for you or that you
Right.
expected more from them and that their behavior is not okay. I can't wait because that's something that I'm still struggling with in this very moment. Navigating with friendships of mine or with professional relationships, it's like in the moment when someone's belittling me or when someone doesn't show up for me, I can't wait to finally be able to be like, the way you're talking to me, I I do not appreciate. That's not okay. Or can I stop you for a second here? It feels like you're disrespecting me. Or, whatever it is, like I can't. And I almost thought I could do it the last time I was being belittled in a professional setting, and I just let it go. And I'm like, because in that moment, it happens so fast, right? Someone's telling you something that you're like, ooh, this is hurtful. Ooh, this is painful. This is not true about me. But this is your perception of me because of this one moment or this one mistake that I did or whatever it is. And I just can't, it just couldn't happen because all these things in my head are going on. Like, one, I don't want to cause a scene. Two, I don't want people to not like me. Three, or not like me, but not like me enough to keep me on the job because I have PTSD from not being able to retain a job, get laid off, all this stuff. Or it's like, is this going to go back to other folks and then they're going to put me on the list of not being able to be a good worker or like doesn't do well with collaborate. I don't know. There's so many things that could go on that I'm just too scared. And then I think about, gosh, this is how things like inequality and oppression and discrimination. These are how these things are perpetuated because I didn't stand up for myself. And then I hear that someone else down the line also was yelled at by the same person that belittled me. And it's like, why is no one standing up? Why is no one speaking for themselves? But it's for all the reasons that I listed just before. And then it's like, of course, this is how these systems perpetuate. There's no accountability. And if you stand up for yourself, there's no way to know how that's going to either turn against you or be a win for you. And that's what's so frustrating, especially in professional settings when your job is on the line and you need to make an income for yourself because that's how you feed yourself. You're not going to choose a battle there. It's still difficult to choose a battle for your personal friendships too, because somehow having those battles with people that you're close with are even harder. So even though those are the most important conversations to have, I'm tired. That was a lot.
Yes, but I agree with you. It's one person at a time that creates systemic problems, right? And it's
Right.
also one person at a time that can change them. I can think of two things when I was younger. I mean, I had a person I worked with when I was younger, right out of college, and she was just deplorable to work with. And I remember finally going back there, and I'll tell you what, I was shaking over
Mm-hmm.
standing up for myself and telling her to knock it off. And she laughed at me, but
Wow.
okay, but I lasted on the job longer than she did, so who had the last laugh? Okay. And also in my personal relationships with friendships, I remember telling somebody finally that I had had enough of not feeling good around them, and they completely deflected what I said and made it into something else. And I'm like, okay, well, this person is not open to hearing this. They just can't take it in. They don't have that capability. So I think that sometimes you have to decide, is it worth it
Mm-hmm.
or is it not? And I remember in a past conversation that we had how I was so alarmed by my mom saying goodbye to this friendship.
Right.
But now being older and understanding, if you're not getting something from it, if you're not being nourished, put your
Mm-hmm.
time and energy somewhere else. And that's kind of how I feel. But I think what you said in what you said earlier was getting quiet. And I think I began to do that. As I became the older faction at my school site, I started to become more quiet
Mm.
because what began to happen for me, and this can be completely egotistical of me, but I always felt that it was important at a school site, which is a small community in itself and part of a larger community, that people should know the history of the school when they get hired in. So,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't it be great if a principal could introduce staff members to each other and let the staff members talk about their history at the school? Never happened. Never happened. We would be introduced on the fly at a staff meeting, or we were never introduced if we, sometimes our staff meetings would be segregated, so we were never introduced to the person that was at a different part of our school until we bumped into them and we had to do it on our own, or it was like an offside. And so if you had history with the school site, if you had been there long enough, the work that you did was never known to new people entering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that created, I know for myself, I don't know for others, so I never really talked about it, an inequity in what they expected from me.
Yeah.
I remember hearing, you never sign up for blah, blah, blah. Well, I've been here 28 years. I think I have probably done my fair share of signing up for blah, blah, blah. You just don't know that because you don't know anything about me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So part of that is very powerful. If you could do that and people knew more about who you were at a site, there would be maybe easier collaboration because people would have more respect for each other,
Yeah.
right? They wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
just throw them aside because they didn't sign up for one PTA meeting 1 month that year or something,
Mm-hmm.
when they may have done PTA meetings for 14 years in a row. But how would you know that? Because nobody's ever said this person has been involved with. You don't have to say everything, but you can give them a pretty good idea. But I think the idea is that teachers coming in should already know that somehow. And
Yeah.
maybe mature teachers coming on to a new school site might know that, but young
Mm-hmm.
teachers who are coming in have no idea
Mm-hmm.
unless they've really thought a lot about public education and have had children of their own and have seen a little bit of stuff. They really don't know the underpinnings of what's going on among colleagues at a school site.
Yeah.
So that would be powerful in that people would feel maybe less inhibited about talking to one another and really getting closer
Hmm.
professionally. And it's different on school sites. The competition is not there like it is in the corporate world. It's
Especially right
totally
now with the
different.
economy. Yeah.
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 The only time it was weird for me was when we had tenured teachers versus temporary teachers.
Hmm.
And there was tension because temporary teachers never knew if they were going to be asked back the following year.
Right.
And I remember one teacher saying to me, "It's not fair." And I said, "Well, regardless of whether it's fair or not, I can explain to you why it is what it is. It's better to be on a temp situation than be on a pink slip.
Right.
You do have the capacity to possibly come back in. I use pink slip, riff, whatever you want to use. But more importantly, I said, well, I'll take your temp status and be 30 years old, and you can take my tenured status and be 55. What do you think?" I mean, it all depends on where you are in life, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
And it's true. I mean, things may have been easier for some of us coming in earlier because we didn't have the economic situation that we do now that teachers have to
Hmm.
face.
Hmm.
But you can't change when you were born. You can't change when you decided to go to school.
Hmm.
You can't change any of those things. It is what it is at the moment.
Hmm.
But being liked, and especially for a woman, whether it's a professional or personal, if you're not being likable, you're such a flippin' target for things.
Oh,
You
you
know,
are. You so
you
are.
know,
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
it's very frustrating because they want to know what your problem is and
Hmm.
why can't you get it together. They could
Hmm.
be mean all day long. Men, I'm specifically talking about, because I
Sure.
had many male managers. They can be mean to you all day long. They can say things that are sexually harassing.
Yeah.
They can just be not nice, and
Hmm.
you cannot. There's no way that there's a platform for that. At least back
No.
when, I don't think it's
I
changed all that much,
I
but
don't think it has, honestly. Yeah.
maybe it's more under the below the
Yeah.
surface rather than out there.
Well, yeah, and I've had a lot of male bosses or male managers, and it's like I'm sure every person wonders if they're likable or not, to a certain extent. But whether or not a man is doesn't wouldn't cost him his job nearly as much as it would cost people like us. It's just one of
Sure.
those things where I understand people may not be the best to work with, whatever that is, but I never go in being like, is this guy likable? Because one, I'm terrified of men, especially when they're in authority figures, and I'm trying to work on that. But I feel like I constantly have to prove myself when I'm working under a man in a professional capacity, or they're my boss or manager or whatever it is. And I hate that feeling. And I really worked on it, and I'm still working on it. But this feeling of, do I not like you because you're my boss and you're an authority figure, or do I not like you because you're not great at your job, or because your personality is not cool, or like you still have misogynistic undertones? There's so much stuff, right, that I'm trying to figure out, parse out from men in professional jobs, but it's also so many men who are terrible still have their job 10 years later. They're still at their same place. Like, they don't have to worry about layoffs, whatever it is. And that's what's frustrating too. Like, they can be totally disrespectful. Totally disrespectful. I mean, how many documentaries are out there about men that perpetuate harmful things or do harmful things and still have so much influence, power, and wealth? And if that's the case for those types of men, then it's the case for mediocre men. It's the case for men who don't do jack shit at their jobs. There's a safety net that our society perpetuates. And likability isn't even part of a man's radar half the time. In a professional setting, anyway. Yeah, I know I'm
Right. No,
making generalizations, of course. There's lots of gray areas in what I'm saying, but generally speaking, this has been my experience.
yeah, no, I understand that and I agree with some of it. I'm thinking that the best that we can do maybe in a work environment when we are empaths is not to immediately throw bias onto people.
Sure.
Maybe if
Yeah.
you don't come in with that bias,
Yes, I shouldn't do
maybe it
that.
would be less provocative for you in that
Absolutely.
situation.
I totally agree, and that's something I'm working on. And I also think too, What I've learned working in corporate worlds is HR isn't really for you, the employee. It's for keeping the company looking good. And so you really have no oversight into how people are acting or behaving in these professional settings. And I think that's the scary part too, because there isn't oversight. There just isn't. And that's
Well,
what
that
perpetuates things. Because
yeah,
HR,
well,
it's a business entity. It's not for the employee. It's to keep the
no,
business going, you know?
I agree with you. I think that HR, well, many departments and corporations are there for litigious reasons. They want to make
Yes.
sure that they're not being sued and they
Right.
don't want their employees to file cases against them. I see that it might seem like the bias is more towards the company than it is towards the actual employee. But I would like to also believe that there are things in place for corporations that do care, that they don't perpetuate bad working environments.
Here's the thing. I like to think about it this way. Corporations, creative agencies, wherever you work, business brands, I mean, it's a smaller version of the rest of the world. So if
Oh, it's
we
a
can't,
microcosm, sure.
it's a microcosm, right? So if we can't figure
Sure.
out how to be equitable in the world outside of corporations, then of course the corporations are going to perpetuate the same issues that we're still fighting against outside of. So that's why we're in a crosshairs, okay?
Okay, yes. We're screwed?
No, anyway,
Yes.
I'm just pointing that out because I find that as I've been through 4 layoffs and have PTSD and have struggled with likability and trying to advocate for myself and not coming on too strong and not being mean but being friendly and all this stuff, I just tend to think like, oh yeah, there's corporations for whoever I work with next or for next. It's just a smaller entity of what we're dealing with now outside of corporations. It's troubling and it's hard and it's difficult to navigate, just like so much stuff in life. But hey, we're doing the best we can. At least I
True.
am.
And it's hard to be human, but I'm thinking that when
It
I
is.
was younger, we didn't have all these letters for things. Like we
What
didn't really,
letters?
like PTSD. We didn't talk
That's
about,
because yeah, it was so stigmatized.
well, that and
But the
because it was also,
DSM-5 existed back, or DSM existed back then.
it sure
It
did,
was just
but I
very
don't think,
problematic.
right. And it was people that were really on the fringes who were, the ones that were being diagnosed, if they were
Right,
being
but also
diagnosed.
the fringes might be more mainstream than we think, right? I mean,
Sure, no, no, I
yeah,
get that, but I'm just saying
yeah,
people that had very difficult
yeah.
issues that they had to
I
deal with.
understand. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I just don't. All I remember thinking when I got a job was, "Yay, I got a job, and I'm going to do the best I can with that job."
Hmm.
And if my boss is mean to me, there's really not a lot. I mean, this is going to sound naive, but there's really not a lot I can do about it,
Yeah.
right? I can call him on it, or even her, but mostly it's him's. And at that time, and pray that he wasn't going to fire me, or just not navigate it in a way that it wouldn't become an issue for me anymore,
Right.
right? I just remember doing a lot of that at home. If somebody said something to me that if a supervisor said something to me that was upsetting, I would just come home and cry, or I would cry on the way home from
Right.
work,
Or I'd
right?
go to the
I wouldn't
bathroom and
ever,
cry.
right? I never
At work.
reported anything, right?
Oh my gosh.
And
See,
yeah,
that sucks though. Like the amount of times that I'm sure we both cried on jobs or after jobs. I know that's like a natural human thing to you. Sometimes you get upset, but it's like people typically make you feel that way. Make you feel like you're not valued or you're replaceable or they're just mean. And it's just like, I've cried so much at work. So clearly this is a hot topic for me.
yeah, and it's different. I mean, the way that I went through my working years and my working for myself years is totally different
Hmm.
than the way you've had to navigate. It's just different and it's hard.
Yeah.
But what's not different, and what has not been different and has been a common thread, is how as women do we garner the respect that we deserve, whether we are likable or not.
Exactly.
Because right, because even as women, we have women who are not as likable. In fact, women women together in workplaces sometimes is problematic as well without men's influence at all.
Sure,
And
yes.
that's a whole other conversation. But
Yeah, with
how do we not succumb to things that men say to us that can flatten us and shouldn't? Number one, they shouldn't be saying it. Number two, we shouldn't be responding to it. I
yeah.
think that is the non-reaction has to be a certain kind of diplomacy that women can use that is stoic, which disarms men because men think that they're going to crush you and you're going to become emotional, and they have right, and instead I
Emotions are our
think you just
superpowers, okay?
they are, but I'm saying it in such a way as they think of it.
No, I know. I'm just retorting.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
yes, emotions are superpowers, and more men should be able to show their emotion, and we should
Yeah.
just be people on jobs instead of genderized on jobs,
Yeah.
whatever that
Is that a
spectrum of
word,
gender
Mom?
is. I just made it up. Genderized? Why the hell not?
Okay.
It sounds good to me. It's an adjective verb. It's both. Yes, we shouldn't have to worry about how we're perceived because of how we identify. We should just be perceived as what kind of person we are doing that job that day.
Yeah, but it's so tough because we can't extract our identity from the work a lot of the time because our identity influences the work. I mean,
No,
that's
true,
why
but what
this.
I'm saying is
Yeah. Oh,
what I'm saying is, why should a manager or supervisor, whatever the heck your boss's name is, why should they be able to somehow extract from you a personality trait that they can use against you?
right. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, like a
That's what I'm saying.
weakness or like
Right,
a wound or
right.
whatever. Yeah, I know.
Right. I had a principal a long while back that I can talk about because even if my colleagues were to listen to this, I think they would know who I was talking about. And they were very, very difficult. And whatever they did, if they made a mistake and you called them on the mistake, they put that right back onto you. And
Hmm.
so I remember my principal at the time said, I'm going to be coming into your room on this day and I'll be doing this with the students. And the students were all ramped up for it. It was like a reward. And I wrote it on my whiteboard and I had it in an email. And I called the office because they weren't showing up.
Hmm.
And, well, she wasn't showing up. I'll just say what her pronoun was at the time, and probably still is. And she wasn't showing up, so I called and I said, "Where is she?" And she got on the phone. She said, "You have the wrong date." And I said, "I'm sorry, but I don't think so. The kids have been really looking forward to this, and it's on my whiteboard." And she came in, and I said, "It's on my whiteboard." Well, you could have written that just now. And I said, "There's 30 people in this room besides me."
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And just denied, denied, denied. And then finally I said to the kids, I'm so sorry that we can't do this because blah, blah is not showing up and doesn't believe that it was this day. So we'll have to reschedule it. But it was just so depleting, right?
Weird.
And also
Like,
it was for me it was such a put down because I everybody knew on campus that they could come to me for schedulized events. I
hmm.
remembered and I wrote them down. And if
Yeah.
they didn't know what they were, I would tell them. And
Yeah.
if they didn't look at the master calendar and we were at a meeting, I would be the one because that's what
Yeah.
I did. We talked about planners and all that. That's what I did. So
Hmm.
I knew when things were happening and I could be the reminder of that. And I was happy to do that. So for her to say, you don't know what you're talking about, that wasn't the right date. Ooh, that totally ticked me off,
Oh,
right?
totally. Well, it's
Yeah.
like we live in a society where making a mistake is just like so frowned upon. But of course, we're also getting rhetoric being told to us, make mistakes, that's how you learn. So it's like contradictory because in a professional setting, everyone's like so afraid of making a mistake because it's going to look bad. They don't know what they're doing, whatever it is. And it's like, is that going to affect my career and all that stuff? It's like you have a quota on how many mistakes you can make. It's like we're human. We live many, many days. And it's
Right.
like, if we're lucky, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. That's just normal. It's part of the living. So yeah, I don't get that, like becoming so defensive because we're so afraid to fess up to our mistakes. And I understand that. I don't want to make a mistake, but it's because the reason I don't want to make a mistake is because I don't want to be yelled at. I don't want to be, obviously, I want people to know what I'm doing. It's like the shameful thing. I understand it. When you make a mistake, it seems shameful or all that, but it's like, can we just
It's
like
really the
let that go?
reaction more than it is the
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah.
Depending upon the mistake, of course.
Hmm.
I mean, if this is not a life-threatening mistake and it's just a mistake,
Right.
it's the reaction of the people who are upset about the mistake that's what upsets us so much, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And so my likability for this particular principal went way
Way
down,
down.
and there was many other incidences beyond that that were very similar that were very upsetting. But I remember one of my colleagues, which I really loved, she taught kindergarten. She used to say to the kids, the kid would come up and say, "I made a mistake," and she'd go, "Oh, good! Now I have something to teach you."
Right.
She would make the mistake a big, like
A
a
big
party.
deal. Yeah.
Fantastic! Now I have something to teach you.
Oh,
Instead
good.
of what? How could you? I told you exactly what to do. Why didn't you do it? Right?
Hmm.
So she turned it into a game for a
Yeah.
5-year-old, which is fantastic, and
Yeah.
that's what you should do when you're in kindergarten.
And as an
Yeah,
adult.
and as an adult, it
Like,
would be nice if that happened to adults too.
it
But
would be
you know,
nice. I do it to
the
myself. I'm like,
stakes.
oh, made a mistake. No.
Yeah, no. Personally, if I make a mistake, I give myself a lot of grace. But on the job, there's a
Yeah.
lot at stake.
There's a lot of.
But this whole thing of wanting to be liked feels now, as I'm an older person, feels very immature in a way. It
Hmm.
feels like I understand that people behave in all different ways, it has
Hmm.
nothing to do with me, and I will decide who I'm going to like. And I guess I can also obviously decide who's going to perhaps like me. And there's
Yeah.
that old adage that says when you walk into the party, don't worry about if they'll like you, worry about if you'll like them.
Right. That's the same for interviews.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
think that puts the power back onto you. Doesn't mean you have to be
Hmm.
mean and nasty. It
Right.
just means you don't have to be this constant traipsing through the tulips with your friends. You can just be real. And there's going
Right.
to be times where perhaps you're not as likable or they won't even realize it. Because, like you
Right.
said, they're so involved in their own stuff, they really rarely really see what your demeanor might be like
Yeah.
until they can use it against you.
Against you. Exactly.
That is
Yeah.
totally different.
That is different. Well,
Yeah.
here's to being unlikable and not caring,
Right.
and also to being diabolical, if you know that reference. Diabolical women.
Diabolical women. Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.